The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
And welcome in everyone to another edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. JDoc, a good morning to you or a good day to you. Good show lined up, two good guests for the full hour today. Great to be back live with you doing the Labor and Energy Show. And of course, for the benefit of all of our listeners and our viewers, if you miss any of today's program, you can download the podcast. Just go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you consume your content today and search the Labor and Energy Show. JDoc, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Krausey, and this is an important show we're going to have here today. It is great to be live. And, Joe, one of the things that's important for us is you always talk about educating the public, but also the realities, okay? And informing, our listeners on the importance of our resources and really learning about them. Today's guests are going to be Rich Nolan, President and CEO, National Mining Association. Rich is no stranger to the broadcast. And Connor Bernstein, who's the Vice President Communications of the National Mining Association. And so a lot going on in Washington, okay, right now. They're on a regulatory tear, okay, releasing action after action that really are putting a lot of jeopardy to our economy, counterproductive to our supply chain stability, okay, in the energy space, and really issues when it comes to job creation and a lot of the current jobs that are out there. So, we have a lot of vast resources in the United States, both minerals and coal, as related to the NMA, okay? We know that they can be mined here responsibly, okay, in accordance with the world's highest labor and environmental standards, okay, and a huge space for creating high-paying American jobs, okay. But what's going on in Washington, releasing rules and reversing decisions on responsible projects, okay, that will make mining in the United States very difficult. Okay, now here's an important point about this. Just because we're shutting ourselves down doesn't mean that this isn't going on overseas, okay? We're willing to shut ourselves down and not world's highest labor and environmental standards, okay? For, lack of a better term, our sworn enemies, for crying out loud, depending on them and other nations that are not friendly to us and our needs, okay? So lots of repercussions. You talk about and we've talked about critical minerals, okay, heavily that we use for our computers, for our electric vehicles, okay, depending on child labor in the Congo, okay, dealing with China and Russia, okay. So, and we've talked about the legacy of the current administration. We are labor Democrats, okay. They've supported labor for the most part. But this is a major jeopardy, in my opinion, to the legacy of what's going on. And there's so much that people just don't understand. And I think our policymakers don't understand the consequences. So
I was just going to say that, JDoc, one of the areas of vulnerability for us, and when I say us or we, the public, is we don't understand, or we don't have a full understanding of either the issue, the topic, or the discussion. And I know part of that process and the reason the Labor and Energy Show was created was to continue to educate the public. But I also think the decision makers, the politicians and the decision makers need to be more educated and need to have a better understanding on what they're voting for. Because, here's the reality. All of us are so exposed by some of these decisions that we've got to find a way to force change through this education process.
Well, it's the narrative, Joe. It's being dictated by a far left-wing ideology with lots of money. Okay, you and I have talked about it many times. Working together is the way to roll here. Okay, listen, everybody cares about the environment. Okay, but you got to get. And that is obviously we want to save our planet for the next generations and do the right things. There's no question. Okay, even when we talk about jobs from a labor standpoint, we're not talking about jobs in with the impact of the environment and our planet being destroyed. But here in the United States, we have the highest labor and environmental standards around. They don't have that in China, so in the Congo, in Russia. Okay, and we're willing to shut ourselves down instead of being the standard of environmental standards and labor standards. We're willing to shut ourselves down and let you see the ozone and our environment, that's about the entire planet. It's not just a cloud that hangs over the United States. So we got lots to talk about.
All right, let's get to our first break here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Two good guests coming up for you. I promise you that. This is the Labor and Energy Show. Back in a moment.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. As I'm getting older, I would like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Welcome back to the Labor and Energy Show on the Jacob Media Network. Lots to talk about, and welcome back into the broadcast. No stranger of the show, Rich Nolan, President and CEO of National Mining Association. How are you, Rich?
Good morning, Joe. How are you? Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Certainly happy to have Connor Bernstein, Vice President of Communications for the National Mining Association. Welcome to the broadcast, Connor.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you. And so, getting both perspectives is so important. Rich, if you would tell our listeners, remind our listeners who your members are, who you represent.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having us. The National Mining Association is a group of natural resource companies that provide and produce all the minerals and coal consumed in the United States and globally. We're made up of about 290 companies that employ high wage jobs and employees across the country and all the 36 states that we mine products in, and we engage with them to help make sure that they can be successful and provide the base minerals that go into just about everything society needs today.
And Connor, if you would, your role as the Vice President of Communications.
Well, one of the really important things about energy and minerals is the story that we're telling about it and educating. And so communications is really about the story and kind of getting that story out there and understanding what our needs are, what our realities are, and really also the value of these jobs and the impact that they have in communities across the country.
Yeah, and realities is a big thing. But we, being regular people. Okay, and when I say that, I mean we're typically not in the energy space. We've come from the labor space, and we've seen some of these situations, turn like being like Twilight Zone-esque. Okay, that have not only laid our members off, but are unexplainable. And then once we get into this and we get the opportunity to be educated, we just feel it's so important to educate everybody. So let's start off. Okay, coal gets a lot of pushback. Okay, due to carbon content. But my understanding, Rich, is that coal plants have become a lot more efficient. Okay, and now emit a lot less carbon per unit. Of electricity for electricity they produce. Can you talk about the efficiency gains in coal plants and what that means from an environmental perspective?
Absolutely. In the past 10 years, we've reduced emissions for criteria pollutants, the ones that are currently regulated, by over 90%. And that has done a lot to the air. It has done a lot for human health. And we're going to continue to make those improvements as we look at new technologies that increase that efficiency with the flue gases. I mean, this issue of coal is critically important because it is a massive natural asset that the United States has. We have over 250 years supply of coal. We just need to continue to improve how it's used and how it's providing that reliable base load power that keeps the balance in the marketplace. Right now, we've got a lot of renewables trying to come online, but they're intermittent. So when the sun's not out and the wind's not blowing, we need to rely on base load power, and that is coal as well as nuclear power.
And having said that, by the way, you never ever hear that discussion. Okay, when you're watching the news, at dinner time. Okay. Before we get into the policy issues, let's talk a little bit about an overview of the current state of both coal mining and coal-fired power plants in the U.S. Okay, first of all, and I know we're just talking, roundabout figures. I mean, but how much coal do we mine? Okay, and where is it predominantly mined from? Okay, what kind of jobs do they support? And also high-paying jobs, union jobs.
Yeah, so we're currently at about 500 million tons. We're produced in about 15 different states. Certainly, the one you're most familiar with is the Appalachian region, which runs from Pennsylvania all the way south, all the way down to the northern tip of Alabama. So that is a significant area for us. We also are out west in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming, parts of Montana, and certainly in Utah as well. And those are good, high-paying jobs that pay double average wages, $90,000 per. In Pennsylvania, used to be approximately 10,000 jobs in the coal mines. We're now today around 4.5. So there's definitely been a reduction. Some of that is the efficiencies of modern mining techniques, which make mining incredibly safer than it ever has been, and we're very proud of that.
So having said that, we talk about the percentage of our electricity that's generated from coal. Okay, what are we looking at?
Last year, we came in at about 16%, and that's a reduction certainly from about 50%. A lot of that is natural gas has come in. The price is incredibly low with the advent of natural gas fracking, but we've also seen, starting with the Obama administration and continuing on to what we're about to see this week, a regulatory onslaught that has driven up the cost coal, both production as well as power plants that use it, and is really there's been a political agenda to drive coal out of the energy mix in the United States, and that's ongoing, and they'll be doubling down on that, it appears, come Thursday.
And so that's going to be part of our discussion. We got a lot to talk about. Okay, I appreciate that. Connor, anything you want to add there before we?
Yeah, I would just say, coal is at about 16% nationally, and this is going to be part of our larger discussion about reliability. But there are moments when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not out, and you have frigid temperatures and electricity grids are pushed to their limit, that major parts of the country, 40-50% of electricity is generated with coal. It's the reliability backstop. So its importance, the fleet's importance, you really can't be overlooked. We have to be very careful about, recognizing just how critical these plants remain to our energy picture.
How many times a year do we run into a situation where there's a major heat wave? They want to shut us down, okay? But then they mandate that all the plants are running on overtime, okay? What people don't understand is once these plants shut down, they're not opening back up. Okay, so when you talk about the reliability of the grid, we're going to get into those discussions. Okay, so what's happening, Rich? I'll start with you, and then, of course, Connor, if you'll jump in. What's happening with the power plant rulemaking this week?
So there's about half a dozen rules that are coming forward. Some are in different phases of process, but 4 of them are going to be rolled out this week by the Environmental Protection Agency with support of the Biden administration and the White House. That regulatory onslaught will continue to drive up the cost of coal-fired power and really stack up the costs for the utilities that are trying to decide whether to keep well-functioning coal-fired efficient power plants in the marketplace or take them offline.
So let me jump in there and say it. The administration must have done a ton of an analysis on the impact of these rules when it comes to grid reliability. Am I right?
Unfortunately, no, they have not. They've talked about it. They've done some MOUs about understanding the concerns with the Department of Energy. They said they were going to make some revisions. Right now, we have no optimism that analysis has been done. We've been working on legislation called the GRID Act, which would require the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to do a cumulative impact analysis to make sure that first we don't do any harm to the electric grid and the availability of electricity in these extreme weather events. Unfortunately, that has not happened. We continue to certainly pound the table to try to bring some reality to this madness.
Okay, Connor?
Yeah, the amazing thing is we have some incredibly sharp folks at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation. Their jobs are the reliability of our energy system. They have the background and the expertise to do it. And EPA simply has decided not to consult with them in any significant way on single individual rules, much less the cumulative impact of what they are pushing forward. And so you have these reliability regulators warning that we are in an incredibly perilous moment, and EPA is kind of doubling down on the problem.
Yeah, and that makes sense because we don't need to go to the experts, that are in place to make sure we don't get ourselves in a pickle like this. Okay, what is leading this? Okay, why would our administration double down on rules like these without an analysis from the people that are there to do an analysis? Rich?
Yeah, I think they're hell bent on moving forward with their extreme agenda. Let the chips fall where they may. We'll bring these alternative power sources online, but the sheer fact of bringing renewable power sources online is you need the permits to stand up a wind field or a solar field. You need the permits to transmit that electricity. They're forecasting a need of about 10,000 miles of new transmission lines. We know how hard it is to get those sited.
Well, we get the permits.
We built only 251 miles of power lines, so there's no reality check here.
I was going to say we can get the permits overnight, right? Just a little application and
right.
or Connor, am I a little off?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And this is one of the great challenges in this moment. Building anything in the country is hard. And so what we are finding is this agenda that it makes taking things off the grid pretty easy, and is done pretty recklessly without any recognition of how challenging it is to build new things, much less, we're not just talking about replacing existing capacity. I think something we're going to get into more here is electricity demand is soaring for a number of reasons. So the gap, the gulf, the challenge just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and there's just no recognition of the on-the-ground reality.
Well, with technology, okay, we need the grid to take on more, okay, and we're growing, technologically in so many areas, okay. We need the grid. We're bringing in EVs, which we're all supportive of, but let's throw the EV mandate, a little word at the end of that, changes the game. Okay, so we are. You wonder when and what's cool about this conversation is this can be a very complicated discussion. Okay, when you talk about the grid and a lot of those things, typically Americans aren't sitting at the dinner table talking about it. Okay, but what they may be talking about is, because it's summer or winter, is, honey, would you do me a favor? Please turn up the thermostat. You know what I mean? And we expect to be able to have electric and our air conditioning and for our heat to come right on. Okay, and that is all in jeopardy. What are the experts saying? So we've been warned about this, correct? In other words, when you look at NERC, okay, they've and even without factoring in the impact of all these new rules from the EPA, they warned us this past December that 2/3 of the country is facing high risk of power shortfalls and blackouts by 2030. Okay, talk about that, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible statistic. That edge of the risk, especially coming in the summer and winter months where things get extremely difficult to move those electrons and wield that power without a dedicated base load, which is underpinned by these coal plants. We're going to be at great risk of having that power, and if you can get it, it's going to be extremely expensive because the rates are going to go through the ceiling. We've already seen over the past 3 years a 30% increase in electricity bills. That is unfortunately a direct outcome of what happens when you try to replace well-functioning power plants with renewables.
Connor, jump on that for you, because it's your job in a lot of sense to take these messages and make sure that the public is educated on them and that our policymakers are educated and we all know what we're doing. What do you face in that task?
Well, I think that they're at times really nuanced and complicated conversations about all this, but when it comes down to it, this is back of the napkin stuff. You have the actual reliability regulators, you have grid operators, you have utilities themselves saying, this is what we think we need from a power supply standpoint, and this is what you're leaving us with.
And when you say that,
we're short.
Right. And when you say that, what's the reaction you get? Because our whole thing is working together and let's come up with a solution and everybody wins, right? We've talked about it on our show, Rich. Connor, what reaction do you get when you talk about these facts? Do they think you're just trying to fear mongrel and, represent your members? Or, is anybody getting, exactly what you're saying?
Well, I think that, one of the things we do, and we like to get a sense of kind of how the public is understanding this or if there's concern about it. We actually go out and do some polling to see if people are aware of these issues. And what we're seeing is a surge in recognition. And unfortunately, I think part of that surge in recognition is the fact that in a lot of states in the country, when you're turning on the news and checking the weather during the summer now, there's also reports on whether or not the electricity grid is going to hold up. I mean, Texas has been through this. California is going through this. Other states are going through this. At Christmas a year and a half ago, up and down the East Coast, there were emergency alerts sent out to people saying, hey, turn down the power. We don't know if we're going to be able to keep the lights on. People are increasingly aware that there's a problem. And so I think that if there was any fear mongering or if people were disconnected from it, they're kind of colliding right now with a really harsh reality.
Well, you would hope that, you don't have to, you can tell that, the individuals, the fire's hot, don't put your hand in it, right? But I fear sometimes when having these conversations with individuals like yourself that, at least our policymakers that they may be obviously following a trend and bowing down to individuals who are funding campaigns, that we're going to have to face a reality and get ourselves shut down, okay, in many cases before people really understand when you're jumping up and down with the bullhorn that we're not just doing it because of our jobs. We're doing it because of the realities that are out there. Before we move on. Okay, we talk, because we're talking about the reliability. PGM, who's our grid operator, released a report last year that warned fossil fuel powered electricity plant retirements that they are greatly outpacing new renewable power bills. Okay. Since then, we've had a large number of offshore wind project cancellations. There was a string in New Jersey and Massachusetts last year. There were more announced project cancellations in New York just last week. Has anybody in the administration raised concerns about the reliability in light of these cancellations? Rich?
Not in the administration. There has been no recognition of the cancellations of the renewable projects. I mean, I would just say that the PJM warning is very stark. You don't tear down a well-functioning house until you have another place to live. And that's exactly what's happening here. And you couple that, and we'll get into this later, but you mentioned at the jump, the electrification and the drive in the economy and the forecast that are going to require a lot more electricity demand from data centers and artificial intelligence. Those centers that are being put in all over this region right now, the electricity demand is skyrocketing. At the same time, we are hindering our supply.
Okay, so we got only a couple seconds till we go to the break. At what point do grid reliability officials start getting louder, okay, on the need to protect all of our electricity supplies? Rich?
I think you're starting to see it. There's been probably over a dozen hearings this Congress where the regulators have come forward. But we really need PJM to step up and talk to their politicians and tell them that, listen, we've warned you. You need to give us a lifeline. You need to give us time, and you need to make sure that we have a chance to do our job and keep the electricity flowing to our towns, our homes, our communities, and our families.
Connor, last word before the break.
I think tomorrow we're at a crossroads, and it's going to be fascinating to see what the grid operators and utilities have to say.
All right, we'll have more from our Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey and our guests Rich Nolan and Connor Bernstein of the National Mining Association when we come back.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lee Hockey a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Back to the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. We're having a frank discussion with Rich Nolan, President, CEO, National Mining Association, Connor Bernstein, Vice President of Communications, National Mining Association. Gentlemen, let's talk about the administration and where you take the most issue with what's going on. Okay, we know the Obama administration, similar rules, talking about the same types of issues and shutting down things. Where do you take issue in particular with this administration, Rich?
Well, we certainly have a same vision in that technology is the path to additional improvements in emissions for all types of energy. We get that. Unfortunately, the recommendation in the rules that are coming out tomorrow prescribe a technology that is not affordable, that is not readily available at scale, and won't work in many of the states where these plants exist because the geology to store, say, carbon is not appropriate in that location. So what they've described is as a technology. You can stay in operation, but you have to put on this billion-dollar technology, which no one in the capital markets is going to come forward with at great risk. And so that's the caution that we're talking about specifically.
And when you talk about, so we're gonna talk about carbon capture and a number of these things. If you would, Connor, jump in there.
Yeah, I think one of the real issues that we've seen, tomorrow is the culmination of a 3-year plan, cumulative plan from the administration. They made very, very clear from the get-go, this is not about improving the efficiency of plants and making plants cleaner and recognizing that these plants are an integral part of our electricity mix. This is just about closing plants. The EPA administrator came out and said it. The best way to reduce emissions is if you get accelerated plant closures. And he said that in 2022, and nothing has changed since. And yet the entire world has changed when it comes to electricity demand and the reliability picture. And that is just so disconcerting.
Yeah, I mean, it ignores common sense, and we talk about the twilight zone. Okay, I mean, you don't have to worry about a leak in your roof if you don't put a roof on. Okay, you're going to get wet all day and all night. And at the end of the day, it's how are things different now than when the Obama administration first tried a similar playbook? Rich?
Well, they tried it, and it turned out that what they were proposing was illegal. We took them to court and we won. Unfortunately, the damage and the number of plants that were shut down through the Obama administration's effort were permanent because companies make decisions on what they see coming down the road. And if that risk factor and those costs continue to escalate, they're going to jump out and cancel the plant. You asked if there's any changes coming down the line. Last year we did see some of the life of a few of the plants get extended. Bloomberg did a story that because of the reliability concerns, they were reconsidering some of their scheduled closures and kicking them out somewhat. That was good to hear, protecting those jobs, whether it's the coal miners or the workers of the plants or the steel workers. So we'll see what comes tomorrow. But it's going to make it even harder and harder to extend the life of these plants and those jobs.
Connor?
Yeah, I just think across the board, taking us back to the Obama administration, the real concern was cost. Obviously these rules were illegal. We stopped them in court, but the big fight was over cost and what it was going to do to the economy and to Americans. Now, cost is certainly part of the equation, but we are now dealing with reliability, whether or not the lights even come on when you need them to. And I think that is just a totally different landscape that people need to pay attention to and should be paying attention to.
So if we shut our plants down, okay, that clearly in seconds we're going to realize, relative seconds, that we made the wrong decisions. These plants are going to close and not open back up. Are we still going to need these resources? Are we still going to need the coal? And by the way, where are we getting it from? Rich?
Coal continues to hit record levels globally. A good portion of the U.S. coals are starting to go more and more exports. One of the things we saw with the Port of Baltimore is there are two major coal terminals there that have been shut in, which is unfortunate. But we're looking to get that open by the end of May. We also use a lot of metallurgical coal and steel making here in the U.S. and globally. So in addition to thermal coal plants, we also have to keep a watchful eye on everything that's happening in the steel markets and what's going on with some of these mergers.
So when you think about it, okay, you mentioned, of course, artificial intelligence, data centers, electrification. Okay, this is a vastly different world, okay? And it's changing every day. You guys out, the NMA, you did a recent white paper, the grid reliability crisis collides with surging power plant demand, okay? Based upon a lot of these factors, okay? I've been on, I was appreciative that you sent me the white paper, and it was a great opportunity for me to learn it, right? I'm an iron worker, okay? Doesn't take, real long to figure out that the left hand and the right hand are certainly not working together here. Where and why, and what is the reaction that you're getting from that information that's black and white when you take it to policymakers who, in many ways, and let's talk about somebody who's extreme, okay, that is trying to shut us down. Let's shut you down and then we'll worry about everything else. Okay, what are the responses we're getting from those individuals that are at the forefront of this and very dangerous movement? Rich?
Well, we rolled that white paper out just last week in advance of what we expect to happen tomorrow. Connor is one of the lead authors of the paper, can talk about it, but I anticipate a large human outcry from our elected officials starting today and going through tomorrow and into the weekend.
Connor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think reliability is increasingly becoming a nonpartisan issue. And you are seeing moderates from both sides of the political aisle step up and say, hit the brakes on these rulemakings until you've actually done the reliability analysis and you've brought in the experts and heard from them. But what's so concerning is this just doesn't seem to resonate with the administration. And I expect we're going to see confetti tomorrow and a lot of backpatting about what they've done. And the rest of us are going to be stuck with the consequences.
Yeah.
And Joe, there was a half a dozen moderate Democrats that sent a letter, I believe it was yesterday or Monday, expressing deep concern about how this is going down, how fast it's moving, and the real impacts on their constituents and the issues related to reliability and affordability.
I'm a big believer. I have a saying, and by the way, it's a blanket saying, and that is it applies to almost everything in life. You can do what you want to do if you're in that position, whatever it is. You cannot avoid the consequences. Okay. Unfortunately, in this situation, the consequences are incredibly great. Number one, we're gonna have a lot of batting and all those things. I wonder, what the legacy is going to be when you think about the potential, and people jumping up and down and going, this is moving too fast. You're making decisions here that are going to impact, millions and millions of people. Okay, with our basic necessities in life. Okay, let's talk about this from a job standpoint. Okay, the administration talks about clean energy jobs that will replace coal in these power plants. Now, let me just say this. Okay, we've had members of our board. Sean Steffi would be a good example. He's a Boilermakers representative. Went to a job fair for renewables. Okay, and just to see what was going on. Okay, talk about the high-paying jobs and all that. $16 an hour was the top line. Okay, so likely speaking, you're going to have to work 80, 90 hours a week. I'm being sarcastic, but not really. And then you'll probably likely be on public assistance with a lot of these jobs. Talk about this, Rich and Connor, and the misnomer that people think they can just, that there's going to be an equal distribution job transition, and how untrue that is. Rich?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the level, I think those jobs are probably less than half. They're not in many cases, they're not salaried, and often they're transitory and temporary. Whether you're putting in, a field install or a turbine, once it's in, it requires very little oversight and people on station. Coal jobs are in the community. They've been there for a long time. People have worked in our industry for generations. They like what they do. They love what they do, and they really want to be part of a community, not in the truck driving all over different states for temporary opportunities to install these technologies and then move on to the next. That's no way to live.
Connor?
Yeah, and even going one step further, you get to a point where you're dealing with energy rationing or soaring electricity prices, and you start short-circuiting economic opportunity in this country. Other things will not get built. Investment will not come if electricity prices soar, if you can't count on reliable supply. There will be the worst kind of trickle-down effect from energy rationing. And our viewpoint all along, and what we've tried to emphasize, is that build new things, focus on addition, just make sure you aren't undercutting the foundation of our energy system with your plans. And the foundation's going, and we don't have a good plan on how to replace it, much less meet this new demand.
Yeah, and
Joe, there's a manufacturing revolution going on right now. I think we're putting steel in the ground in like over 140 communities for new manufacturing facilities. Some of those are data centers, some are not, but it's happening. And all those manufacturing facilities rely on one thing: reliable electricity. And this is going to be a problem.
Counterproductive. Let's talk about, since we're talking about jobs, the maintenance jobs. Okay, so there aren't really many when it comes to renewables. So we're in a process where we're shutting down a lot of our plants at a rate that is far outpacing. Okay, renewables coming into the markets. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, and we're talking about our jobs and a lot of things that Connor just talked about. But there really aren't many maintenance jobs. Okay, once that a turbine gets up and going, there's not a lot of workforce there to maintenance it. Coal power plants still require a decent amount of maintenance that building trades workers primarily do. Can you elaborate on the maintenance jobs at coal plants? What they're like, and talk about the high paying nature in comparison to renewable jobs. Rich?
Well, these are incredibly high skilled, steel workers, boiler makers, electricians. They've gone to through the training. They're proud of what they do. They're highly skilled and well paid, and do a fantastic job. The renewable put up and move on source is lower skilled, and that's why the pay is less.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about, and I know not every plant across the country is a union plant, but I've talked about that. What we're doing is not this is not an organizing effort. This is a save our resources and our industry effort so that we can all work. Okay, which is really important. But when we are talking about our union community and our workforce, okay, highly trained, okay, educated, okay, apprentice programs are the life's blood of what we do. Okay, somebody gets injured or sick, you can call the union hall and get somebody to replace them, in hours. Okay, and so when I think about this and the loyalty that our union workforce has within their communities, especially our building trades. Well, obviously, we're talking about a lot of our building trades. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to a union workforce, and you talk about the commitment and the high skill, we talk about a lot of times being in a union is the difference between having a career and a job. Okay, and so you do have a very passionate workforce. Okay, working on these, on these in these plants and are committed. It's their career, there's pride, and of course bringing resources within the community that help us survive and live our way of life. Okay, so such a big part. Let's we only have a few minutes left. I want to get back on. We talked about you hear a lot about the need for permitting reform. Okay, and the challenges to even build renewables. Talk about how that gets involved in the problem here, Rich.
Well, certainly, whether it's the copper for the windmills or some of the silver and nanotechnology that goes into the solar panels, all that takes minerals, and minerals are a global commodity and they're traded, but a lot of it right now is coming directly from China. We'd like to reshore that and stand up U.S. mines that can help provide those materials. We have some of it here, but we could have a lot more. Unfortunately, right now we're having a difficult time getting those permits that we talked about.
Takes how long, Rich, to get a permit? 7 to 10
years, and then you have to go through litigation on every major mining project. So it's add another 3 on top of that. It's incredibly difficult to source those minerals from new mines in the United States.
So you mean to tell me that what's going on in the Congo? We've had a broadcast with Siddharth Kara on the broadcast, and he was able to get a video in there and show the child labor issues that are going on there. And you mean we couldn't even stop that if we wanted to right now, because we can't even get out of the way of our own permitting rules to compete with those situations, because it takes 7 to 10, maybe 15, 13 years to get a permit to actually get involved in the mining of the critical minerals. Am I on point or am I off?
You're exactly on point. We have cobalt resources here in the United States. That what's happening with the child labor and the artisanal miners in the DRC is terrible. We've all seen the photos, and that's example number 1 of why we do it safer and better and in full compliance with labor laws to make sure that children are not exploited. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Exactly. I say this, when you see child labor and slavery, literally going on right there in front of your face on the video, such a painful part of our history. But I guess in some cases, some people, it's okay if it's not, if we don't have to see it in our own country. It's actually completely infuriating Okay, and to be able and actually contributing to that is, it's of epic proportions. Infuriating. We're down to the nitty gritty, gentlemen. Okay, and we got 2 minutes left, real quick. How's the industry prepared to respond to everything that's going on in regards to what's happening, in Washington, to these rules? I apologize. We only have like a minute and a half left. Rich, and then if you would, Connor.
Yeah, we're doing outreach like this show and across the country to make sure our allies and our friends understand as we take the message directly to the administration. Connor's work in communications and working with the media to make sure they're fully educated. Hopefully we can slow down some of this. And of course, like we did in the Obama administration, we'll see you in court.
Rich or Connor?
Yeah, we will see you in court. And in the meantime, we shouldn't have a single conversation about these regulations, about this regulatory agenda, without bringing up the costs, without bringing up the trade-offs in jobs, being very clear-eyed about that, and also the reliability conversation. It's coming if it's not already here. So we're going to continue to amplify it and do our part to tell that story.
Rich Nolan, President, CEO, National Mining Association. Connor Bernstein, Vice President, Communications, National Mining Association. I want to thank you both for being on the show. Okay. I want to thank you for the fight that you're putting up, not only on behalf of your industries and our workforce, but really for the benefit of the American people. Okay, we gotta educate and keep doing what we're doing and work together to come up with common sense solutions. And you're at the forefront of that. Thanks so much for being on the broadcast, gentlemen.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.
Thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. We'll have more from the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey in just a minute.
My name is Eleanor Northaft. My husband was in the union, Local 282. And as I'm getting older, I would like somebody to fight for me. So I called up Retiree First.
Hi.
And I got Brooke.
So nice to meet you. I'm Brooke. I'm an advocate at Retiree First. I've been working with Eleanor for 3 years. She was one of my first calls. I helped her with transportation to her doctors, getting her glasses reimbursed.
Oh, they are pretty fancy.
I'm basically just answering any questions she has.
And I always have a lot of questions.
Not too many.
I have a friend there. I love it because I can depend on her to help me out in any situation.
Oh, I'm excited.
She always comes through for me.
Do you stream on a Roku, a Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app. Watch Action News live.
And the big story on Action News.
Plus special programming, breaking news, and severe weather updates.
Tremendous amounts of rain.
Always on, always the news team you trust. Watch 6ABC 24/7 on your streaming device. Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
And back here on the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. Boy, it's amazing, JDoc, when you sit back and listen to all of the material that is part of the conversation, and certainly good stuff today with Rich and Connor, really meaningful information. And again, I just want to stress to the listening audience and to those watching the Labor and Energy Show, do download the podcast on Apple or Spotify and re-listen to some of the bullet points and some of the conversation today.
Yeah, no question about it. One thing, and the last thing we didn't cover is what can you do? Okay, what can our listeners do to impact what's going on? Okay, and and the blanket answer is call your policymaker. Okay, voice your opinion, get educated, like we're talking about. Okay, the important you hear Rich and Connor, and you hear.
How about this, JDoc? Download the podcast and send it to your policy decision maker.
Oh, absolutely. But
ask them to listen to it.
Absolutely. And you listen to Rich and Connor and you talk, they're, on board with working together for common sense solutions, like you and I have talked about. Okay. We talked about caring for the environment and all those things, but the realities are so important. Okay. And the leadership that the NMAs, providing on these issues, not just in representation of their members, Joe, but in representation of everything involved in regards to the security of our grid, our energy security, and as you talk about, you hear them talk about technology coming in and our need for energy, okay, self-sufficient energy security, to be out with our labor. Our labor, the quality of our labor, okay, the efficiency of our environmental procedures, okay, to how we work, okay, our environmental standards, all working together, as renewables come into the market and doing this the right way, not shutting ourselves down, putting ourselves at risk with our grid reliability. When the officials responsible for the grid are jumping up and down, going, "We got major problems," before these rules come in, okay, from the EPA. So definitely a great show. And again, you and I are jumping up and down, from the highest mountain, for people to be educated, our policymakers, to be able to stand up to what's the pressures they're facing and say, listen, we're not doing this at the risk of our American people and families, okay, and jobs and plants that are never going to reopen, and at the risk of losing our energy security. We're doing this together and creating common sense solutions for a new energy future as the landscape changes, as technology comes into the markets.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. As always, we thank everyone for being a part of the program just by listening and consuming the content. And we certainly thank all of our partners who help us provide this platform in year 3 now for educating the public on the real story, the real facts, and the ramifications that occur when decisions are made that will affect us all. Ultimately, they will make it to our kitchen table, and that's how I would like to close it.
100%, Joe. No question about it. Couldn't have said it better myself.
On behalf of JDoc, I'm Joe Kraus. This is the Labor and Energy Show with JDoc and Krausey. See you next time, everybody.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky, the largest workers' compensation law firm in Pennsylvania. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. Even better, Pond Lehocky doesn't charge a dime until you win. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
The best way to describe Anthony, David, and Jan are that they're my brothers. I met Anthony at LA Fitness because I noticed that he had a Teamster's bag and his dad was a Teamster leader.
I'm a third-generation son of labor. My grandmother worked in a factory. My mother and father were both Teamster members. I don't think there's a trade that I don't have a family member in.
What's so big for me coming from a union background is what affects one member affects the entire membership.
A lot of people can relate to the issues that individuals deal with. We pride ourselves on empathy.
The big value that's always instilled in you if you grow up in a union household is the importance of brotherhood. People that lean on each other, that rely on each other.
When we were building this business, having that background and knowing what matters most to the union members is really what we use to drive and build out Retiree First.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.